You want more than just the headlines? Find out what's going on and what it means with me, Dennis Prager, this morning at 11, right here on AM 560, The Answer.
Dan and Amy, we got some pregame audio from President Trump in advance of his closed-door sit-down with Russian autocrat Vlad Putin today in Helsinki. My understanding is he opened with, in America, we watch TV. In Soviet Russia, TV watch you, and other Yakov Smirnoff isms. He also had this to say.
We have discussions on everything from trade to military to missiles to nuclear to China. We'll be talking a little bit about China. Our mutual friend, President Xi.
Sure. It's like the three amigos, Xi, Putin, and Trump.
I think we have great opportunities together as two countries that, frankly, we have not been getting along very well for the last number of years. I've been here not too long, but it's getting close to 2 years. But I think we will end up having an extraordinary relationship. I hope so. I've been saying, and I'm sure you've heard over the years, and as I campaigned, that getting along with Russia is a good thing, not a bad thing.
And he has been saying that. He also, in advance of the summit today, communicated multiple venues that his expectations were low. He had no expectations going in, that there was a hope that there could be constructive dialogue, but there was no expectation that there would be.
And with that, the world awaits, and I look forward to our personal discussion, which I think begins now, and then we're going to meet our whole team. You have quite a few representatives on that, and we all have a lot of questions, and hopefully we'll come up with answers, most importantly. It's great to be with you.
All right, and against the summit meeting, the backdrop is Mueller's indictments of 12 Russian intelligence operatives on Friday. I think it was Saturday. I saw a tweet from Andy McCarthy at National Review. It was my favorite one. He said, Mueller could indict another 144 million Russians and really pad the stats, but that's not getting us anywhere particularly important. And so, given these indictments following the Peter Strzok testimony before the House Judiciary Committee last week, where does all of this stand, if anywhere new than over the last year or so? For more on this, we're pleased to be joined by the aforesaid Andy McCarthy, former Chief Assistant U.S. Attorney in Manhattan, contributing editor at National Review, and along with Kim Strassel and Byron York, like the must-read individuals on all things Russian collusion related. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
So the indictments of those 12 operatives on Friday, how should we ascribe importance, if any, to that?
I think it shows that the special counsel investigation has been completely unnecessary from the start. There's nothing in this indictment, first of all, that we didn't know before the 2016 election. I mean, there's a detail here and there. But the thing that people need to understand is when the Justice Department, under the guise of filing an indictment, files a document that names a bunch of people and presents a narrative that everybody who is involved in the exercise knows will never be tested in court. There's not a single one of these Russian government officials that is ever going to see the inside of a federal courtroom. That this is simply a political exercise, and they're putting out something that's more of a public relations statement than an indictment. And the farcical aspect of this, Dan, is the Deputy Attorney General's comment on Friday. This is Rod Rosenstein in connection with the filing of this indictment, where he takes pains to remind everyone that in our justice, I want to quote him because this is too precious not to quote. In our justice system, everyone who is charged with a crime is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Yeah.
So
yes,
we now have a situation where for 2 years we've been told that Russia basically committed an act of war against our democracy, this cyber espionage operation. And up until now, we've had intelligence reports and congressional reports which have outlined what they did and how they did it. But now we have an indictment, and the government's formal position is we have to presume that they didn't do what we've accused them of. Great.
Yeah. Well, let me just interrupt on Rosenstein, specifically Pollyanna there. There was some rumblings that there was going to be a move by House Republicans to impeach him, but Trey Gowdy poured cold water on that over the weekend. What's your thought on that?
I just think it's really dumb. I mean, I'm all for holding people in contempt at this stage if they are not producing the documents that Congress is entitled to and presenting the witnesses that Congress is entitled to. And I said that over the weekend. I think that the congressional investigations ought to shut down if they are not going to hold people in contempt, because they're just inviting people to do the kind of stunt that Strzok pulled the last couple of weeks, where he basically tells his side of the story, answers the question he and the FBI decides they want to answer, and refuses to answer the hard questions or talk about any other side of the story. If they can show that Rosenstein is behind that, then take action against Rosenstein, sure, by all means. But from what I understand, and this is based not only on Rosenstein's testimony, but statements by Chairman Nunes of the Intelligence Committee, Rosenstein has been pretty helpful to the Intelligence Committee in the last few weeks, at least, in terms of getting them the answers that they've been looking for. And I think if that process is actually starting to work, then they ought to let it work. You'll remember that Nunes gave them a 5 o'clock deadline about 10 days ago, and then it came and went without any peep, right? We didn't hear another word about it. And the reason it came and went without a peep is apparently Rosenstein arranged a session where Nunes and Rosenstein together, this was apparently a first briefing for Rosenstein as well, got a full briefing from the FBI that had to do, as I understand it, with the origins of the investigation, which is the investigation, that is, of the Trump-Russia thing.
All right, so there's no claim in the indictment.
So I just think that the time. I'm sorry, Amy. I don't mean to cut you off. I just mean the timing of it just is peculiar to me. If it's starting to work, I don't think he's the guy you want to start talking about impeachment over.
Yeah, and the timing too, because President Trump is meeting Putin right now, so it's just a few days before that. But there's no claim in the indictment that the hacking affected our elections, and these charges don't accuse anyone in the U.S. of knowingly helping the Russian hackers. So how is WikiLeaks involved and Roger Stone involved?
Well, WikiLeaks is involved the way that we always knew it was involved, which is they hack the stuff, or they do these spear phishing operations that help them hack the stuff, and then they have thousands of emails, and they need a way to get them out. So one of the ways they got them out publicly was to get them to WikiLeaks, which then puts them out. And again, I mean, we've known that for 2 years, right? Yeah. As far as Roger Stone is concerned, there's an allusion to somebody who certainly seems to fit the bill of Roger Stone in the indictment, but it looks like they dealt with him. They were talking about some information that they had already put out and the significance of it after a couple of emails or a couple of exchanges. I don't remember if it was email or text with this person who was presumably Stone. He finally answers and doesn't say anything of particular importance. And I think the significance of the whole thing is that they're communicating with Stone through the false persona, I think, of Guccifer 2.0, meaning that the Russians were using the false identity to communicate with people in the United States, whether it was Stone or anyone else, which suggests that there was never any collusive relationship between anybody in the United States and Russia, that they were trying to deceive people. So I think taking it as a whole, it seems to me that it precludes the possibility of there ever having been an espionage conspiracy between Russia and the Trump campaign. If the Russians are trying to deal with you through a false front that they misrepresent as somebody else, they're obviously not in collusion with you in an espionage conspiracy. Now, if people in the United States exploited the persona that they thought was Guccifer II that turns out to be the Russians, it's possible that they could have committed other crimes or done other bad things. There's nothing in here that would suggest that any of these people actually committed a crime. Any of these American people on the American side who dealt with these false personas or dealt with WikiLeaks.
Well,
but I don't see how you get to a espionage conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. What this indictment seems to suggest strongly is that there wasn't and couldn't have been such an arrangement.
Well, it's interesting. After Peter Strzok's testimony last week, Peter Strzok, Trump referred to as a disgrace to the nation and the FBI over the weekend. Difficult to disagree, particularly after his public performance. But it seems like other outlets and Beltway thinkers are adopting a argument you have been making, Andy McCarthy, for many months now, which is Trump needs to declassify documents to move this thing along. Wall Street Journal opining over the weekend, declassify the FISA applications, declassify the procedural documents, declassify the 302s, the FBI agent notes from interviewing a source or a subject, the 1023s, FBI debriefings with informants or sources. Let's see them. Let's get to some sort of conclusion here.
Yeah, well, Dan, as you know, I've been saying this from the start because I've never seen that there's any evidence of a espionage conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia. And that is the fig leaf that they have used, the possibility that could have happened and that Mueller needs to be able to probe that. That's been their rationale for not disclosing this information. And it just seems to me, number one, the longer we get into this, the less and less likely, I would say it's impossible, that there was that kind of a scheme. But secondly, and I know this as a prosecutor who worked in national security cases, there are some times, particularly in the national security realm, where there are more important things than the prosecutor's investigation. And one of them is knowing whether our president was in cahoots with the Russians or not. So it seems to me that the most important thing is put out all this information so we can know exactly what happened here. If the president did something that he shouldn't have done, we need to know that.
Right.
And on the other hand, if the FBI used pretexts that they're not, every now and then the Bronx in me comes out, right?
It's okay.
If the FBI used pretexts that they're not supposed to use in order to ramp up or conduct an investigation of a political campaign during the height of the election season, that's something we need to know too.
Yeah, you need to put a bug in Rudy G's ear and let's get this thing moving. He's Andy.
Rudy's got a lot of bugs going right now.
Yeah, well, yes, clearly. Andy McCarthy, former chief assistant U.S. attorney in Manhattan, contributing editor to National Review. His recent piece, nationalreview.com, Struck by a Farce. You want to check that out. Andy, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Have a great week.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro